morning, everyone. Welcome. We'll be kicking off momentarily here, just letting a few people filter into the room. Okay, Sarah and team, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, well, hello everyone, and welcome to the next part of the Summit Series, the IHL Career Panel. My name is Janvi, and I'm from Michigan, with Katie from Illinois, Kaylee from Jacksonville, Florida, and Shalu from Sharon, Massachusetts. If there are any questions, we ask that you send your questions to the chat. This meeting will be recorded for future reference and for those who couldn't make it today.
And now we will introduce all of our panelists and give them a quick background.
To start off, I'll be introducing Christian Jorgensen, who serves as legal counsel at the American Red Cross National Headquarters, specifically in public international law, international human rights law, refugee law, and international humanitarian law. His professional career has taken him everywhere from the United Kingdom, Germany, Cyprus, and Colombia. I will now pass it on to Christian to introduce himself even further.
Hi, everyone. Thomas, if you can give me permission to start my video, it's not letting me. But I am here.
1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
All right, there we go. Yeah, so my name is Christian Jorgensen. I'm happy to be here and hopefully give as much advice as I can to any questions that are out there. So as was mentioned, I work for the Office of General Counsel, where I focus on international humanitarian law and help run the International Humanitarian Law Dissemination Program, which is done through the efforts of volunteers throughout the regions. A little bit about my background, and I'm happy to delve more in, is I got to be interested in international law and really hone my skills in that area by focusing on migration issues. My master's is in migration studies, and I really focused on the intersection of law and policy and how it affects migration trends. And then also I worked on a lot of asylum cases and cases that aren't necessarily asylum, but have to do with migration rights and lots of different aspects of who qualifies as a migrant and the subsidiary definitions that people fall under for that. So I'm happy to speak on that more. As was mentioned, I have a lot of international experience that I was able to do during my academic career in a professional sense. So I'm happy to share how I balance that and also give you tips on how you can make those opportunities appear for you. So.
All right, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll have lots of questions for you. I think next is Kyla. So Sarah, yeah. So next we have Kyla Van Wyck. Kyla is an executive associate with UN Women with over 13 years of experience working in humanitarian and international development. She has served as a training officer in Afghanistan, assistant in the UN Action Mine Service, and on the high-level panel of digital cooperation. She has coordinated projects, field work, and intelligence transfers in the field and remotely. And I will pass it on to Kyla to introduce herself even further.
Hello there. I hope everybody can see me okay. I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much for inviting me. It's such a great, I'm sure it'll be a really good panel today and a good session. I thought that I would just introduce myself a little bit more and just briefly talk about how I got into this, because I know probably at where you guys are in life, it's very difficult to know what to do, what you want to do in the future, and to know where you're going to go. So I have been working for the UN since 2009. As was mentioned already, and I didn't really know early on that this is what I wanted to do. When I came out of high school, I actually was thinking about being more into photography, or even I wanted to be a flight attendant. So the fact that I ended up here really is kind of surprising to myself. But what I ended up doing, and I wanted to mention that I started, whole reason I got in with the UN actually is because I started my career as an English teacher. And when I was about 21, I was able to go to Indonesia as an English teacher. And from there, I stayed for 3.5 years. And then over the years, I was able to travel to many places and do a lot of different training roles. And that actually got me into the UN. In 2009, I was chosen to be a UN volunteer, and then they sent me to Afghanistan, and I was there for 4 years. So that actually got my foot in the door, but I really knew early on that I actually didn't enjoy training. So after that experience in Afghanistan, which was amazing, I decided I didn't want to do training anymore. And I went back home. I went back to school, and I finished like a degree in a bachelor's degree in justice studies. And then eventually I was hired by the UN in headquarters, so in New York. And that's where I've been since last year, I believe it was. And now I'm working with UN Women, and now we do a lot of like strategy, planning, budget, that kind of role in the, in UN Women. So that's a little bit about myself and how I ended up where I am today.
Thank you, Kyla. And next we have Greg Porter. Greg serves as the American Red Cross's Service to the Armed Forces and International Services Director for the Greater New York region. However, prior to this, he served in the U.S. Army, worked in media production for the Army, Department of Defense, Department of Justice even, and he even started his own documentary film company called Developed Over Coffee Productions. And I will now pass it over to Greg to introduce himself even further.
That's great. Thank you. Whoops. Trying to get my video started there. So thank you for having me, for asking me to participate in this today. I'm really excited to just share a little bit about myself. I think just, quite frankly, I'm not even sure how I made it to where I am today. It's been a very circuitous route. As you said, my career began with the U.S. military. I stayed on with the military for an additional 20-something years as a civilian, working in various capacities, various management capacities through DoD and Department of the Army. But I would say that, anyone looking at a humanitarian career shouldn't discount the military, because, you may not think necessarily that the U.S. military does a lot of humanitarian operations, but in fact they do. They're very, very good at it. And, some of the opportunities that I had included working with UNHCR in refugee camps in Iraq, among other things. Over in Bosnia, in various places in the Balkans, a lot of those operations were not war operations, but focused more on humanitarian operations. And quite frankly, the same way that the Red Cross deploys resources to international disasters, the military can do the same thing and often does. So I would just say, for me, it was a strange route to become a humanitarian. I'm happy that I'm here. And I think a lot of the opportunities and a lot of the experience I've had internationally throughout my life and with the military has helped prepare me for this role. So that's it. I hope to answer any more questions for you. Thanks.
Shala, you're on mute, or we can't hear you, one or the other.
Can you hear me now? All
Yep,
right.
perfect, loud and clear.
Thank you. We conclude our panelists with Dawn Clark-DeCouvy. Dawn uses almost 2 decades of her experience counseling organizations to support the CEO, C-suite executives, and the board of governors of the American Red Cross by giving guidance on all parts of the business as the interim general counsel and chief compliance and ethics officer. She's worked with diverse public and private companies, offering legal counsel regarding specific laws in DC to Shanghai. I will now pass it on to Dawn to introduce herself even further.
Hello, thank you so much for that great introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to serve on this panel. My current role involves oversight and support of the attorneys and professionals in the Red Cross Office of the General Counsel. I don't know, can you guys see me? I'm seeing it. It looks dark, so I'm not sure if you can see me. I hope you can.
You see a black screen, you might have to.
I'm not sure. Hang on, let's do that. Thank you.
There we go. Perfect.
Pardon me. All right, very good. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, so my current role involves oversight and support of the attorneys and professionals in the Red Cross Office of the General Counsel. OGC, which is Office of General Counsel for short, or work spans the review of transactions for the purchase, sale, and licensing of goods, services, property, and intellectual property. We also support labor and employment matters, so HR, litigation matters, and we've a few, fundraising and development efforts, compliance and ethics nationwide, as well as the educational mission of this stellar IHL team, right? So like Kyla, I'm a former high school English teacher as well. I taught English in New York City for 5 years before going to law school, and I'm also a licensed counselor. So professional development and career fulfillment is very near and dear to me. It's something that I focus on. So I look forward to hearing what's on top of mind for the participants in this seminar as they chart a course for the coming months and years, and to sharing, takeaways from my own experiences. So thank you.
We will now take questions from the audience that you can send in the chat. This is just a reminder that this meeting is recorded and can be accessed later if needed. So I actually had a question that I wanted to ask. This is for all of you guys, if you guys can go in the same order. How did you become inspired to pursue the career that you guys are currently in?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. So for me, it was all about, I always wanted a career where I was passionate, obviously about the subject. I think that's how everyone starts looking at careers. You think about what you're interested in. And I remember in high school, I was always fascinated with history, with international issues. And so I looked, how do you become a diplomat, right? So I kind of focused my academic career towards that route. And then in gaining experience to hopefully be able to do that someday, I started working with migrant communities in my local area. I grew up in Iowa, and a lot of people don't think that there's a lot of migrant communities there, but the specific town that I work in when I was growing up had a large influx of Bosnian refugees. And so there were lots of opportunities to volunteer with refugees in my area. There's also a lot of Burmese refugees where I'm from. And so I taught English, and I realized that there was a lot of lacking attention on that community, and I wanted to do something to support that, to support those individuals so they could succeed in their new homes, really. And so I volunteered a lot, and I found that the passion and the interest was never leaving me. I was never getting bored with it. And so from there, I wanted to study more about, I would hear all these stories about why people, came here, right? I was hearing a lot of their stories, and I realized that we focus a lot on the resettlement aspect when it comes to refugees, but very little people were focusing on trying to stop the the catalysts that create these situations. And so I found a master's program that allowed me to focus on research doing that. And so I spent 2 years doing research across Europe and South America as part of that program. And I had a lot of great mentors. And through a lot of experiences working with that community, I realized that not only were a lot of people not focusing on the catalysts that cause forced migration, a lot of the lawyers working in that sphere they didn't really understand the law either. I mean, they're great attorneys, but it wasn't their focus area. And I was kind of convinced that if this was my passion area, I can do the most good by getting licensed to be able to help those people. And from there, I went to law school. And during law school, I mean, one thing led to another, and I was still working internationally. And I was working on a lot of policy initiatives, mostly trying to address the issues that caused forced migration. And through that, I got introduced to international humanitarian law, because conflict is often the number one reason that people are forcibly forced to migrate. And I saw that as a tool that could be used to kind of stop people to do it. The law does its best to prevent certain atrocities from happening, and I wanted to get more involved in IHL. And then an opportunity opened up at the Red Cross. And a lot of my career has been random opportunities presenting themselves, things that people are not even posting online saying, we're looking for this. And a lot of it was just me preparing myself the best I could to take those opportunities as they came. Because a lot of the time people think like, oh, these positions exist, and that, you know, you just apply to it when it opens up. And a lot of the times that's not the case. Up until the American Red Cross position, I went through no formal, and this is not going to be the case for everyone, no formal application process, in the sense that like there was a position, I applied to it. A lot of it was me reaching out to people and saying, hey, do you have any opportunities available with the work that you're doing? And then I had prepared myself in case they did, to be able to demonstrate like, I'm capable of doing that for you. Can you give me the chance to, you know, prove that to you and show you and get involved in the important work you're doing? And so a lot of my career has just been by happenstance, where opportunities came up, but I had prepared myself to take hold of those opportunities. And that's the number one advice that I would give everyone, is that, you know, there is no one set path for anything you want to do. And a lot of opportunities you have to go find. And that's not just by like Google searching it. That's by learning as much as you can, networking as much as you can, speaking to people and telling them, hey, I really want to do this. Is there an opportunity for me to grow under your mentorship or with your organization to demonstrate the capabilities I have? So I hope that answered the question, but that's kind of what led me to this, was just maintaining the passion and interest I had, and then really proactively looking for opportunities that allowed for me to feel fulfilled through the work that others were doing.
Maybe I can continue. Yeah, actually, so mine was a little bit like Christian's as well, in terms of not really applying and just having things fall in your lap, kind of. I knew it very early on that I just wanted to help people, but I had no idea how. And then when I did this teaching thing, it really gave me the opportunity to feel like I was helping people. And I also love to travel, but I didn't really know that I didn't really know anything about the UN, or even have an idea that I wanted to work with the UN, until I was in Indonesia and I was working for Oxfam, and I was like the teacher. I was teaching the office. It was basically their goodbye gift, because they just had the tsunami happen. I think that was like 2004. No, yeah, 2004 or 6 or 4, I think it was. And it just happened. So I was, so actually, sorry, I was there 2006, and all the NGOs were leaving Banda Aceh at the time. That's where the tsunami happened, and Oxfam was giving a gift to their local staff, and it was basically me teaching them English for the last couple of months that the office was running. So during that time, I got a lot of experience working with like an NGO, Oxfam, because they would take me on their little missions and everything, which was a lot of fun. But I do remember the staff there were telling me that they work for an NGO, but their ultimate goal was to work for the UN. And they were always saying that the UN was the thing that everybody, if you worked as an NGO humanitarian, the UN was the place that everybody wanted to go, but nobody can get in. So they recommended that I applied to UN volunteers, United Nations volunteers. And I do recommend, if you guys are interested in this kind of work, it's a great place to start and a great place to get yourself into the UN. It's called UN volunteers, but you still get paid, which was a good thing. So funny enough, I actually did not apply to anything. I just put up my profile, and because my profile had many years of teaching experience, one day I just basically got an email saying, you've been accepted for a mission in Afghanistan. Do you accept your mission? Me thinking it's a scam, I went with it. So I just went through the whole thing. At the end of the day, ended up being real. They sent me a ticket, and then off I went to the UN, to Afghanistan. So a lot like Christian, I didn't apply for the job at all. But when I did the interview, they thought I applied. So I'm asking them, where did you get my where'd you get my email? Like, where did you get anything about me? And they're like, oh, it's from the job you applied for, which I really didn't. So somehow I ended up in the UN. So I do, so basically once I got into the UN, I realized that this really was my passion, and I'm not ever moving. Like, that was just where I felt I should be. And I basically went from the UN volunteer to working at headquarters. So I got to experience the field, I got to experience headquarters, and now I'm experiencing an agency, a UN agency. And so it's really an amazing experience, but now I know this is where I should have been from the very beginning, but I know it's very difficult at a young age to really know where you want to go. But sometimes it is important to reach out to, I mean, yeah, as Christian said, it's not, you're probably not going to apply for a job and always get it, but there are so many other ways, that avenues that you need to approach and try, and never close a door in order to find the thing that you are looking for and what you want to do.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on to what Kylie said, but one, I had many professors recommend the UN Volunteers program to me when I would express to them my interest. So I would encourage people, if you're in a situation where if some, like a position in your life, and that's not for everyone, where you can take on a mission at a whim's notice, like, it's definitely something to think about. But also, I just wanted to highlight the impact that volunteering has had on me. Like I mentioned, that was part of my pathway, but I also talked about how it prepared me for opportunities. And I really want to emphasize that volunteering, for me, the biggest benefit wasn't so I could put something on my resume to see, like, I did this, I did this, I did this. It was the skills that I was able to gain from those volunteer opportunities that were around me. And I wanted to commend all of you who are helping to lead this panel. Like, it's great that you can put on your resume that you're part of the American Red Cross Youth Action Campaign, but the biggest benefit is for you to gain skills that you can, transferable skills that you can take with you as you become leaders in your own lives as well. So every opportunity that, and I'm proud of this about myself, and I think a lot of the times we don't talk about ourselves that way, but is that I really did work really, really hard to improve on things that I needed to, and to gain new skills and go outside my comfort zone. And volunteering is one way that you can do that. So I just wanted to highlight that volunteering alone is a great thing that you can do for your future careers.
So I think, unlike Christian and Kyla, I applied for every position I ever had. Nothing fell into my lap necessarily, but again, it was, I think, being open to opportunities, which is very important, recognizing opportunities and allowing myself to accept positions where I was in a place of growth, outside of my comfort zone, and just, taking things as they come. The other thing that I would say, I don't want to be I'm not here to recruit for the military, but I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for the military. I wouldn't be where I am today had I not had the experiences internationally that I had serving in the Army, and then working for the Army and DoD for an additional, a lot of years. Those opportunities sort of allowed me to recognize the importance of having an open mind, particularly when you're in someone else's country, um, and providing assistance or doing whatever the operation happens to be. But it's not our home. It's not America. We don't have all the answers, and so recognizing that going in and being open to new cultures, open to the new languages, open to basically everything, just having an open mind, I think is very critical. And quite frankly, it took me a long time to get there. And then, yeah, just being comfortable, being uncomfortable, being comfortable with accepting new challenges, being outside the comfort zone, and being willing to continue learning. I went back to school and got a master's degree when I was in my 40s. And I'm happy about it. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And again, I think I enjoy being a learner, and I'm continuously learning every day. And I'm never going to shut my mind off to the opportunity to learn. So I think that's my answer.
Right, and I think you asked about inspiration, right? And what inspired us to be where we are. And I love to talk and share information. I have a strong sense of justice and fairness as well. So very earlier on, I knew that I would engage in something that involved education and advocacy. But then I also love to travel. I like international cuisine, and I love to, I love learning foreign languages, right? So I'm always, working on some language. So I, at one point, declared that I was going to also work for the UN, Kala. So that was my official thing when I was in high school. I'm going to do like French, Spanish, German, because I'm going to work for the UN. But then, as I got a little bit older, I started to be a little bit more practical with my living situation as well. I didn't have the luxury of, doing things without worrying about money. And so I certainly took the teaching path first because it was the most accessible. And after 5 years of teaching, I then went to law school. And then once I became an attorney, though, I found that there were channels that were going to allow me to still do my thing that I really love. So I didn't have to just zealously advocate for clients, right, which we do as attorneys, but I was able to educate, right? I could travel, practice, and still practice my foreign languages. So, in my early law career, I was on project finance teams and, setting up an airport in Peru and, a paper factory in Bolivia and in the Philippines. And so you got to go to all these places. And then I was in the China practice group for a few law firms where I was spending, quite a bit of time living in China as well. So you just get, it's what I think is sometimes you can be very rigid in what it is that you think you want to do, and you think your path. And I'm telling you that the path is so circuitous. And what you have to be is, in Hong Kong, there are these really tall buildings, and it's kind of, if you've ever, I don't know if anyone here has been, when you get there, you'll know it's just very tall buildings. What I notice is there's like a hole in the middle of all of them going up the center, and it's designed to kind of help the building sway when there's a typhoon, because they're very prone to typhoons. And if they didn't have this space in the middle, this kind of flexibility, they'd break, there'd be an issue. And I just see, as you approach your career, to be like that. Know what you want, but have a very general idea, and focus not just on a job, but focus on the characteristics of the job. Kyla says she wants to help people, right? And, and when you kind of have an idea of the characteristics, then it's easy for you to kind of just fall into different positions. So for me, interestingly enough, when I kind of, after doing all the work and the fancy things I wanted to do, I still felt not as fulfilled. And so, I got an opportunity to join the Red Cross OGC team as a counsel. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to come here and relax because it's the Red Cross. What are they, what are they doing, right? Nothing as fancy and sexy as what I've been doing. And I could not be more wrong. We are everywhere doing everything. We've international, there's just anything you can think of in like an issue or matter, we deal with it at the Red Cross. It's just really amazing. So you still get to do the high, high complex, sexy stuff. But then with the one difference is that now you can feel fulfilled every day, because it's really awesome to be associated with a righteous mission, right? And to be like just a humanitarian, it's so fulfilling. The same feeling a soldier has, and you have too, Kyla, when you do your UN work, just this feeling of being a servant. So for me, I think as you plan and look ahead, you want to be flexible, but also I've applied for every job except for the Red Cross position. Someone reached out to me, but what I found, there's nothing wrong with either approach as long as you know who you are. But I think one of the things that everyone I think has in common here is this understanding that you do need to do some preparation and learning to situate yourself. It's the background that you have that makes you attractive. But if you're kind of stagnant and not thinking ahead, you're going to miss opportunities. So you've got to lay up yourself like a basketball game and just be all ready to catch the ball, because it's going to come at you anytime. So that's all I had to say.
All right, thank you so much. We're gonna move on to our first question from the chat, and it was, how can you get involved in helping refugees and migrants in many ways that do not involve law? So I'll open it up to any of the panelists.
I mean, there's lots of ways. If you want like a formalized way, I would just look for resettlement agencies in your area, because the Red Cross also has a Restoring Family Links program that people can volunteer with in the regions. But there's lots of agencies that are doing things, not just legal work, but helping people become associated to a new society that they've moved into, helping people figure out all the housing forms, helping people, just taking them to the doctor, and if you have the language skills, helping them figure out what exactly is going on. And so there's lots of ways, and a lot of things, it's not even just like we're helping them, we're helping migrants. It's about helping people just live, make their lives a little easier in a new situation for them. So I would contact those resettlement, we refer to them as resettlement agencies, but there's every place probably has one. I'm from Iowa, but there's Catholic Charities here, and they're always looking for volunteers to help newly arrived migrants into the area, whether it's just help them move into their house, for example, helping them, I've already mentioned, like taking them to the doctor. A lot of them don't have driver's license immediately when they come here. So you can help them with transportation, figure out the bus system. All of those things help people in general. Like even if I've moved somewhere in the United States, someone showing like, here, I'm here to help you, helps me feel more welcomed in that new community and allows me to feel more secure and kind of lead the life that I want to live, just from a societal, sociological perspective. And I think that's something that people can do. I would look for opportunities that you can look at via Google, or you can just give a call. They're always looking for volunteers, and they might ask you, what are your skills? And they'll find the best fit for you to volunteer, just like the Red Cross does as well.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. In New York City, we have a huge refugee population right now. There's a lot of things happening in the city. There are dozens and dozens of agencies that are operating in that space, just trying to do the best they can to help. And here, Catholic Charities is really sort of overseeing and sort of managing the large group. And so they would probably be a great place to start, regardless of what city you're in. Because if nothing else, they know who all the players are and where the opportunities lie. Yeah, I think that's it. There was something else and it slipped my mind. So there you go.
Yeah, and I'll put something in the chat for an organization that I used to work with that actually, if it's still around, a database that basically you click the state you're in and it will give you all the agencies within that state that you can contact for opportunities. It's meant for people who need the services, but you can definitely use it as an opportunity to find further opportunities. So I'll put that in the chat later on.
UNHCR is also another good UN organization to to look into. Obviously, you need experience and stuff, but all the experience you get could lead you to a career in UNHCR. It's a great organization.
Okay, and the next question is, how important is the ability to speak other languages for working in these careers?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yes, sorry. The question is, how important is the ability to speak other languages in working in these careers?
I can take that. I mean, I went and did all this language prep work, and I think in my entire practice, and I'm not as active, I think, internationally in the humanitarian space, but what I found in my business career is that most people speak English or they're trying really hard to. And so it's so interesting to see. And then when all else, you can usually find someone. And so when all else fails too, there are all these cool apps now that you could use. And so if you want to help, start from that. And usually there are resources that can help you locally to get, do what you need to do. But I'll let some of the others weigh in.
For the UN, languages are really well, can be important. Everybody always associates the UN with like interpreters, but actually there's a ton of other jobs in the UN outside of an interpreter. So it's great to have languages, and always when you do apply, it will give you an extra boost. And some vacancies actually require a second language. So definitely if you want to work for the UN, I would recommend getting a second language, but I don't really have a second language. My only second language is Indonesian, which doesn't mean anything in the UN. So, and I still work for the UN. So if you want to work for the UN, I would recommend a second language, but you can always get a job without having it as well.
For me, I would say helping create opportunities, having those skills are very, very helpful. It helps you stand out, I guess, during the process. If I were to say professionally, how much has my language, it's helped me. So I really, really enjoy languages. Like, it's a passion of mine. So I will put in all the effort that I need to gain the skills that any job requires with that. But that's because I'm really interested in it. But at the same time, professionally, I'd say in a legal sense, there was always an interpreter there. But that's really, really important from a legal sense, because I have to make sure that everything the client is saying to me, there is no room for my own personal mistranslation on something. So there was always a translator for there. I'd also say in an office sense, working internationally, even if it's not required, it is helpful because it helps you become acclimated to the environment that you're in. You're able to, grow those relationships. There's something to be said when you start speaking to someone in their native language. There's just some type of relationship building. Like, even when they speak English to me, the things like, oh, I like you, like, you're a good person. For some reason, they could say that in Spanish and I will be like, oh, thank you so much, that means a lot. But when they say it in English, there's just something like psychologically where it means more. So like, I will say being able to have conversations like that has helped me in international offices to grow, camaraderie amongst my colleagues. Professional sense, there's been plenty of times where it said preferred that you speak Spanish. But like I said, there was always a translator there to assist me. But it also did help me be like, hey, if worse comes to worse, I can handle this on my own. Situation. I remember when I moved to Cyprus. So Cyprus, they speak Greek, and so I thought I'm going to study Greek, and I got it okay at it. And then when I went there, not a single person even responded to me in Greek when I spoke.
All English.
So,
because they also want to what I ran into is people want to, especially in China, people want to practice with me. So I'm there trying to, oh, there's that, and I have my little language, but nobody, when I say, they just laugh and like, oh, that's good. Okay, now in English, practice with me. So it's very difficult, but it's cool when you want to order your food and things like that as well.
Yeah.
I think it's fun.
Yeah. So I would say it's definitely not a requirement, but I would tell people that it is helpful, makes your resume stand out more. I think it does anyways, it might. And at the same time, like one thing I hear people get really discouraged when they're like, oh, I can't learn a language. I don't believe in that like at all. I think everyone's capable of learning a language. You just might have to, you might have to put a lot more time in than someone else. But at the same time, everyone's capable. But I'd say don't worry so much about the, if it came to my advice about selecting a language is you have to be passionate enough to put in the work for that language. So don't just choose a language because you, in my opinion, think like, oh, there's more opportunities. People look for this language more. Because then in my opinion, if you don't really have a passion for wanting to learn it, you're not going to put in like the effort of reading, watching movies, finding a language partner, like doing all the stuff that it takes, or at least for me, it took to grow your fluency in a language. So end of the day, professionally, it hasn't been that much a requirement. Personally, it's been incredibly rewarding. And so I would encourage everyone to learn it, the language.
And I would say, I had an intern last year working on the international side here in New York City. She spoke German, French, Spanish, and one other language. I can't remember what it was, all fluently. It was amazing. And
Those are foreign languages.
her ability to go out into the community, into the immigrant community, conduct outreach, let them know that the Red Cross was here, make phone calls. I mean, she and I would speak. She called Germany for an RFL case. Then she turned around and called someone in the Puerto Rican community for another case, right? And just her ability to change direction that quickly was amazing. And so, yeah, if you've got those skills, they'll come in handy anytime.
And one interesting thing I should say, like professionally, I'm speaking from someone who has worked for places that have the resources of interpreters. Some places might not have that. So I really do think it's an organization by organization basis. And also like if you're planning on wanting to work in social services and having that personal interaction, then languages are obviously going to be more important. So yeah.
All right, so our next question is, what can high school students do to be more involved in and maybe even get opportunities to volunteer in the UN and further pursue a career in the UN?
Well, I would recommend, like, definitely we have lots of internships. So that's always the best place to start. And some internships turn into like an actual job. So if you're graduating, definitely look into an internship. Also, as I said, the UN volunteers, once you have a little bit of experience behind you. But other than that, yeah, it's really, I mean, it's not as easy as the Red Cross or other places to just pop in and volunteer, or but I would say at your stages of life, I would really just focus and head towards an internship, because that's the best way to get involved right now.
I would just say follow your passion. You know, if your passion is working with immigrants or your passion is doing something international, find a volunteer position or an internship or something like that. Follow that passion, build up your resume, get those experiences, and over time, it's all going to lead you to that next place. And as a lot of us have said today, you know, we didn't know what that next place was, but it happened, and it happened because we allowed ourselves those experiences. And that flexibility to just go with the flow kind of and take each day. As Dawn said, you know, be willing to be flexible.
Yeah, I was gonna remind that it really, I'm always very nervous about my mentees who label the place where they want to go. Because more likely than not, it's you spend so much time focusing on getting there and it becomes an artificial approach. It's better to focus on the thing you want to do. What is it about the UN that you like? What is the mission focus? And then start doing it. And then, yeah, if an opportunity arrives, you can leap. but until, or someone will come and tap you, but be very careful about focusing on the specific place.
Yeah,
I
because
just want to
it's a great opportunity.
I just want to mention as well, like if there's some part of the UN that you like more or that you want to do more, try and get those skills in another way. Maybe volunteer with some of the NGOs here in the States, or volunteer with Red Cross. If you want to work in something with the UN and IHL, join, volunteer with Greg. If you want to, if you want to really pursue a career with the UN and get involved in certain areas, try and gain that experience outside the UN first, because actually the UN really, really appreciates, and you have a really high chance of getting into the UN if you have a solid set of experience already outside the UN. That's really, we're looking for people with this solid experience. So just get volunteer experience from outside, but make sure it's within the area that you want. And then it's so much easier to become more involved in the UN.
Okay, thank you so much. For our next question, we have, other than working with the Red Cross, what are other organizations you would recommend where you can work in international humanitarian law?
Oh man. I'm gonna need I need a minute to think about that. Oh, I mean, obviously, Greg can speak to this. I mean, the US, like what I always suggest to like legal interns that we have is to like, hey, if you're really interested in this, like look at what the J Corps offers, look at what the military offers, because they're the ones working directly with IHL, really. I mean, there's lots of different components of it, but I would say like you can look at the military as an option, not just JAG officers. Like I'm not just pushing anyone to be a lawyer or anything like that, but there's lots of different positions to be involved in. I know Thomas isn't part of the career panel, but you could reach out to him. I'm sure he's happy to talk about the JAG Corps more, but Greg probably has more to say on this. From other nonprofits that I would suggest, there's lots. But it's going to be location dependent. Like there's an academic route as well. You can work with universities and help scholars do research if that's something you're interested in to gain experience. There's organizations like Watchlist who focus specifically on the effects of children having to do with armed conflict, and they have a policy approach, and they work with various agencies of the UN, like the UN Security Council, and they speak to them on issues when it comes to children. There's Save the Children. Like you have to find the connections. Like sometimes there's not always a position that's going to be called like IHL officer for this organization, but you might still be working in the humanity, like the efforts to bring humanity to situations of conflict. So I would look at it that way rather than just say like this is an IHL position, because I don't necessarily think that's how any position like should be worked on like per se. But yeah. I'll think of more. If I have more that you can look at, I'll put them in the chat.
Yeah, I think YAC is a great place to start, though, where we are right now. The Youth Action Campaign is great. The IHL offerings that the Red Cross has is tremendous. And, as Christian said, I mean, again, the military does offer a lot of insight into international humanitarian law. The military lawyers, the JAG Corps, obviously deals in that space quite a bit. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know exactly what they do, but I do know that I have military lawyers, former military lawyers who are international humanitarian law instructors on my staff, and they're amazing. And their insight, what they bring to the table in terms of their experience is pretty amazing. And so if you really wanted to get into it, that's probably a great place to start.
I also just wanted to second Christian's suggestion it just left my mind. But basically organizations like Save the Children or World Vision, these kind of organizations, because a lot of them have IHL based positions, but it's not going to be, I mean, you wouldn't think that it's anything to do with law at the beginning, but yeah, look into these kind of like Oxfam, these kind of organizations.
All right, thank you so much. I think we have a couple other questions. The next one from the chat is, what was the biggest challenge you faced getting to where you are right now in terms of your career? I know lots of you have mentioned maybe your career didn't exactly like go like down like a set path, but what do you think some of the biggest challenges were?
I can take that. I think I'm talking a lot about rigidity versus flexibility here because I was one of these people who kind of had this vision of where it is that I wanted to be. And I remember when I was in law school, I just kept saying, I want to work for international, I want to do international work. I want to be an international lawyer. And at that point, I didn't understand, well, there's no such thing, right? There are attorneys who work on matters that are cross-border matters, right? And then there's, of course, international trade and there's all these other components, but there's not such a thing as international law the way I was thinking about it. And it was just very difficult to kind of make that change, to understand, Dawn, you're going to have to do some regular boring work, transactions. You're going to have to prove yourself and get to the point where someone will have you on a deal team. And even when you're on a deal team, you don't get to go to Peru, right? When, it's just the partners who get to go. So how do you patiently wait until you get what you need, where you need to go? So that rigidity is the thing that I think is the biggest obstacle. And it's the thing that I keep preaching to mentees, to just do not be rigid. If you're rigid, you're going to have a problem in recognizing opportunities. You're going to have missed opportunities. So that was my big challenge.
And I was going to say something very similar. It's great to have goals, but it's also great to allow yourself to experience a lot of different things before you get to that goal. And as you go through life, you'll find that maybe that goal isn't what you wanted to attain in the first place. And so, again, I'm quite happy with where I am right now. If you would have asked me 5 years ago if I was going to work at the Red Cross, I'd have said probably not. I don't see that happening. And yet, here I am, and it's a great job and it's a great opportunity. And again, it's a culmination of a lot of different experiences in my life that I never expected to put together into a position that I didn't even know existed until 2 years ago. So just being open.
For me, it was more because I came from like not poor family, but small town. We were probably middle to low class. So for me, it was education, because there was, I couldn't afford to go to college after high school, and my parents couldn't afford to send me. So, that's why in my mind, I was like, okay, I decided to become an English teacher, and I just left and traveled. So I spent my 20s just traveling and working and doing all kinds of fun things. But that was really the thing that held me back. I probably could have been a lot farther in my career if I would have got my education a lot earlier. And now I do have, well, maybe similar to Greg, I also just got my master's last year in my 40s. So, going through the UN, only sometimes, actually in my early stages in the UN as a volunteer, I didn't even have a bachelor's degree. And I only got my bachelor's degree like 5 years ago, if less than that even, maybe. But it was always the education that I could have been further if I got my education earlier, but it was just because I didn't have the opportunities when I was younger, and plus I wanted to travel. So I would recommend definitely get as much education as you can, as early as you can, because if you wait, you could really be pushing your career back as well.
So the biggest hurdle for me, everyone's kind of touched on bits and pieces of it, but I'd say for me it was pushing myself to pushing myself outside my comfort zone. And I don't mean like environmental, but like really like pushing myself to do everything I can to achieve what I wanted to do. So like, for example, when I graduated from my undergrad, I skipped a lot of my story. There's a lot of missing pieces there, and not everything like worked out. And after I graduated with my BA political science, I worked at a gym. That was not a part of like Christian's professional plan in life, was to go from graduating to go work at a gym. And it was because I had, kind of what Don and Greg were talking, I was so rigid, like I want to do the foreign service. I want to do the foreign service. And then I did nothing to prepare myself if that didn't work out. And so I traveled, I went to South America for a few months, did some volunteering there, and realized like, hey, I find a lot of fulfillment working with migrants, and I'm really interested in it. And I did a Google search, like, is this an actual thing I can study to gain more skills? And then I went to my master's. And even then I found myself reverting to the same thing. Like, I want to work for, at that time, like I want to work for the asylum office. I want to be an asylum officer. Those are the people for the federal government that basically do the first initial screening, determine. It's changed since then. And then I realized pretty quickly that like, I think I need to be more flexible with my approach to everything. And so what I started to do was feel more comfortable with what I have to say and belief in myself, because I was very silent. I'm a very reserved person usually. And I realized I was writing all these papers for grad school. And so I started sending them out for publication, and I realized people actually wanted to publish these things. And that, for me, that was outside my comfort zone, like putting my ideas out there. And then also, to add on to that, before I decided to go to law school, I will tell you that I was, at that point in my life, I had law classes as a part of my master's, and I said 110%, I never want to be a lawyer. I hate this class. I hate this, how this is being taught to me. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. But then I went and did my first like practicum in Europe, and I realized there's a lot of power behind the law. And so then I had to I had to allow myself to be flexible and be like, hey, maybe you do want to be a lawyer. And so I think it's all about not being rigid and being flexible. And that's something that I've improved on a lot in my professional life. And so I would just echo the comments that have already been made, like put yourself out there. I didn't do that, and it harmed me negatively. I allowed it to be negative. And then also I was just like, that's the only thing I want to do. And that also, didn't help me either. So I think flexibility is a key thing that I had to work on.
Okay, and I know we're at time, but we did have one last question. So the question was, is it possible to volunteer alongside the Red Cross staff, such as people in your position?
Could you repeat the question? I didn't catch all of it.
Yes, so is it possible to volunteer alongside the Red Cross staff, such as volunteering with people in your position?
Is it possible to volunteer with my office directly? Is that, I'm just trying to, sorry.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're just asking if they want, is it possible for them to volunteer, like
Yeah,
with people
I mean,
like you?
I'll let Greg and Don speak to this, and maybe Kalia as a volunteer herself. I'm always looking for support. Like, I really think the Red Cross only functions through the efforts of our volunteers who make the work possible that we do. And so please, I'd love to speak with people more about hear what they want to do, connect them with their regions, etc.
Yeah, exactly. As Christian said, the work in New York City wouldn't be done if it weren't for volunteers. They're very active. They're everywhere all the time. And quite frankly, the volunteers come from those very same communities that we're trying to get access to let them know that we exist, to help them out. So yeah, anyone, please, if you're in my region, reach out and I'll put you to work. It'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. I don't know if people realize or participants, the Red Cross, I believe it's 80% of our workforce. Without volunteers, we would never be able to function. So feel free. We've got a volunteer connection. It's our portal, is a platform that onboards volunteers. You fill it out, drop in your information. Someone will reach out to you, do a little bit of a screening, and then you tell them where you want to be. So in even OGC takes volunteers, IHL, everywhere. It's not just people who deploy and go to, the Philippines or, Guam. It's definitely people who know how to code, Power BI, secretaries, people who know how to get mail and scan it. It's all kinds of work. And so we welcome your participation.
And I'm a good example. I work with directly with Greg, and I'm a Red Cross volunteer with the IHL program, the program.
That's awesome. That's another thing. So many levels of volunteers. We have some pretty sophisticated people. It's not just, children. So the thing with volunteering too is you get connections. We have people who are in between gigs who are volunteering, and then they get, certainly anyone who's ever worked within OGC has ended up at pretty large law firms because, they volunteer, they work with us, and they get connected to counsel outside. It's really cool. So do it. Absolutely.
Well, thank you guys so much for all your amazing answers. I believe we have a slideshow. Yeah. So for our upcoming events, we have the National Symposium on Thursday, July 27th from 2 to 3 p.m. and our pop culture event, Avengers and IHL Initiation on Friday, July 28th from 12 to 1 p.m., which the link should be sent in the chat to register. And just want to give one last thank you to all the panelists and to all the attendees who were here. If you could send a reaction through, that'd be great too. But yeah, that's the end of this event.
Thanks, everybody. It was great.
Thank you, everyone, for
Yeah.
including me.